Hanne.
Hello.
Is that how we pronounce your name?
In Norwegian we say Hanne, but you can do what you want.
Okay, thank you. So we're here today to speak about Love, your, I want to say new book, but of course it's not a new book. It's an old book to you. In fact, do you remember writing it?
I remember very well writing it.
And we've just been talking about And Other Stories, being a northern publisher who has brought your book into English, and for that we want to thank them, because unless it was for And Other Stories, I wouldn't have been able to read it. And you know, it's one of the best books I've read. It's really quite fantastic. So wow. I would like to start with that to encourage others to buy the book today. If you don't mind, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the things that I found most striking about the book, and then perhaps you could read the beginning for us. Is that okay?
That sounds good.
Okay, so the story is a two-handed story in that it has a mother and son who glide by each other in this little story. I say little, I mean slender. I don't mean in any way diminutive. It is a grand story, but it's such a small book, you know, the thing we all dream of. And these two different people, different in age, but joined by their relationship, the way that you intersperse their thoughts is quite magnificent. And I wondered if you could talk about why you decided to tell the story in that form.
Yes. Does the audience know about the form?
Speak about it if you would like to.
Yeah, because what I think Rachel you mean by the form is that the novel follows the two protagonists, Jon, the mother, and Vibeke, the son, in a way that they are both that the text kind of intersects being with one and the other, and that there is no division in the text, so that when you read, you go from Jon and Vibeke and then suddenly back to Jon and Vibeke, so that in the text they are very close.
Yes, there's not even a line to separate paragraphs, which is such a bold thing to do. It's so brave, I think, to do that, and it makes it seamless.
Interesting. I'll show you now that I'm here at home, so I have my books. I'll show you. Because love is called Kjærlighet in Norwegian. Is the third novel that I wrote. And my two first novels, they are like this. They are like short, I don't know if you can see, but they're like little text on each page.
Oh yeah.
So they're like, and the second one is at the end here is the same. It's even less text, but because it's only text on one page.
Yeah.
And then one page empty. So when I had written this novel, these two novels, these are 2-in-1 edition now. When I'd written those two, I thought that was the only thing I could do, that I could only write very short pieces of text from a viewpoint, from a person. And then I really wanted to kind of, to expand. And then I thought, how can I do that if I cannot write anything else? I thought, well, okay, I can do it from two heads. I can put two heads into it. And then I started to write texts that were one Jon, and then a little text, and then a little text from Vibeke's point of view, and then a little text from Jon, and until I had like 30 pages or something like that. But it didn't work. It didn't work in the same way as the two first novels did. Because the two first novels have this quality that is a lot more kind of lyrical or poetical, more image-based. But this was more kind of like action-based, and then it didn't really work with those empty, because the empty parts are like pauses, and then I tried, well, I can just, try how, to put them together in the computer. So I did, and then it worked, and then I saw, wow, I can really write a normal novel.
I really hope to find out that what made something work brilliantly is kind of a mistake.
Yes.
Hope. It's very hopeful,
yes.
for other writers.
Yes, isn't it? Yeah. So that's how kind of the construction came, and then I just followed it because I liked it.
Yes, it really is. The flow of it is incredible. You mentioned Vibeke, the mother, and I was very taken by the kind of ways that you have, through the text, limited her freedom. She's away from her son much of the time. She's away from a previous relationship, which you only ever allude to. We never get absolute direction to people or places, or which kind of makes the potential for catastrophe huge. There's such a tension in this book, such a foreboding that builds like nothing really that I've ever read, honestly. And I just wanted to say, for you to say a little bit about how you think the limits of motherhood were addressed in this book.
To be honest, I haven't thought much about it.
That's great, because I mean, we take a lot of that from it, but that you haven't thought about it is fine.
Well, because I started to write this book when I just had my daughter. So I had just become a mother myself, and I wrote this book. Every time she, as a newborn, lay down to sleep, I just, turned on the computer and wrote a little piece. And I think the two previous novels that I'd written, they are without, there are no kids. But this, having a child for myself, opened me, the big question that underlies and made it necessary to write this novel is her being born. And the question that rose in me is that, how can I be sure that she knows that I love her? Because you can say it and say it and say it, but when are the words filled with what they say? I mean, with me, when is there something there? And then I just started to write this novel to investigate, but I also understood having a child also kind of sent me, really, it kind of, teared open my own childhood. So I wrote it, as a mother, but more and more I understand that it's about my own childhood. I mean, it's about being a child, but it's also about being a mother. I mean,
I think that what that brings up is the idea that John's mind, he's 8, is he going to be 9 in the book? It's just going to be his birthday. The nature of his mind is so perfectly rendered that it is a perfect weight to the adult perspective. It's in no way trivialized, or I just find that you create such a great balance there. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the idea of the responsibility of Vibeke to John in the book, but I wonder if first you can read perhaps the opening, or
good,
or what do you plan to read?
Yes, I'll read the opening, and yes, I will not read too much, and if it's not enough, tell me to read more.
Okay, great.
A little bit more than the first page. When I grow old, we'll go away on the train. as far away as we can. We look out through the windows at fells and towns and lakes and talk to people from foreign lands. We'll be together all the time and forever be on our way. She gets through 3 books a week, often 4 or 5. She wishes she could read all the time, sitting in bed with the duvet pulled up, with coffee, lots of cigarettes and a warm nightdress on. She could have done without the TV too. I never watch it, she tells herself, but Jon would have minded. She gives a wide berth to an old woman waddling along, pulling a great trolley behind her on the icy road. It's dark. The snow banked up at the roadsides blocking out the light, Vibeke thinks to herself. Then she realizes she's forgotten to turn the headlights on and has driven nearly all the way home in an unlit car. She turns them on. Jon tries not to blink. It's hard for him not to. It's the muscles around his eyes that go into spasm. He kneels on his bed and peers through the window. Everything is still. He is waiting for Vibeke to come home. He tries to keep his eyes open and calm, fixed on the same spot outside the window. There must be at least a meter of snow. Under the snow live the mice. They have pathways and tunnels. They visit each other, Jon imagines. Maybe they bring each other food. The sound of the car. When he's waiting, he can never quite recall it. I've forgotten, he tells himself. But then it comes back to him, often in pauses between the waiting, after he's stopped thinking about it. And then she comes, and he recognizes the sound in an instant. He hears it with his tummy. It's my tummy that remembers the sound, not me, he thinks to himself. And no sooner has he heard the car than he sees it too, from the corner of the window. Her blue car coming around the bend behind the banks of snow, and she turns in at the house and drives up the little slope to the front door. The engine is loud. Its sound fills the room, and then she switches it off. He hears her slam the car door shut before the front door opens, and he counts the seconds until it closes again. The same sounds every day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was wonderful, thank you. Maybe I'll ask you to read some more later, if that's okay.
Yes, good.
What I was thinking about there was what you've just said about how you can make a child know how much you love them. And it fits with an American review of your book I was reading yesterday from the LA Review of Books, and they bring up a portion of the book where the child comes up to the mother and says, oh, I saw something on the news or in the paper about someone being tortured, being in a hood. You know, the kind of things that children ask you that you don't want to have to answer. And Vibeke says, or says to herself, can't you just go away, play by yourself? And I really felt at that moment in the book that terrible tension as a parent, where you think you don't want to have to solve the problems of the world for the child, since you can't solve them for yourself. And in the review I was reading, they took that to I think they saw Vibeke as like a cold mother who was not interested. But to me, it seemed like a rational thing to do. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about whether you feel Vibeke is a normal mother, if if you understand what I mean.
Well, yes, I think she is. I think she is a normal mother, and that's also how I really wanted her to. I wanted her to be, you know, I wanted the reader to feel that I could have been her. This could have, I mean, I did not want her to be a social outcast that easily you could say that, oh, but she's, you know, she's on drugs or something. Yeah. She can't help it. But Vibeke, I can really, and I really appreciate what you say, that I have written her in a way that I could act myself even.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the kind of like the expectation that the mother must be the container for any kind of chaos that the child brings to them, I think is something that I was so hungry to read about. You know, I really wanted more and more, and you gave us more and more. How far would you say this story is kind of like an Oedipal story?
What do you mean by Oedipal? What's that mean?
You know, that there is a kind of a sexual frisson between the child and the mother.
I have never thought about that. What do you think? I would like to hear what you think.
I feel like that underlies everything, but it is never explicitly stated. But I think perhaps it's about Jon's longing for his mother, rather than, you know, his real desire to have her beside him that comes through, and her real desire for her own desire.
Yes.
I think that's a really fantastic tension. And if you want to talk about tension, this book, honestly, there is, it's worked into the text in such a way, you must read it, definitely. Another thing that I think creates a lot of tension is this book is often described as a shard, a small piece of something, you know, much bigger. And I wondered how you had dared to call it love, because for such a tiny book, it speaks to that gigantic concept brilliantly. But did you consider other titles?
I wrote the whole book without knowing what to call it. But then in the end, so then the text was finished, and then I had to find a title for it. And then because my two previous novels, I don't know if you see, but this is Huck and Entropy. Huck means cut.
Yes.
And entropy is entropy. I mean,
yeah.
I guess you have that in English too.
Yes.
And there were so many readers for the second book, Entropy, that said that, well, it even has a title that I can't, you know, I don't even understand the title, so why should I read that book? Mm-hmm. So I thought this book, it should have the most accessible title in the world. And I think it's really ironic also, because I find love a much more difficult concept than entropy, because entropy has, you know, it has a definition, but how to define love, I mean, that's really hopeless.
And also that the content of the book is not very easily recognizable as love.
No, but I think what you said about the longing, that they're both longing for love, and the tragedy in the book is that their longing is not kind of, they can't, you know,
connect.
No, they can't meet in these two longings.
Yes, yeah.
And also this, I think, and I think when I wrote the book, it was really, because it's written in present tense, everything is happening now and now and now. There's not, it's like there's nothing outside this now.
Yeah.
This now is life. This now is, and I think, at least to me, the way I see it is kind of the deep kind of desperation for me now with this book is that, what if there is nothing? I mean, what if there isn't love? Yeah. I mean, I think that is the greatest fear we have.
Yes.
What if there isn't?
Yes.
And I think in a way, I think that the novel kind of opens that fear in a very kind of physical way without saying those words that I said now. But I think, at least when I'm in touch with the text myself, I feel that kind of icy fear open inside me that I don't have any other word for it. It's just an intense feeling of fear.
Yes.
But I
think
with
that
the text.
you said an icy feeling of fear. That is one of the things that I took from the book, is that kind of like, as you say, a potential for what you didn't say, I said, but you just kind of like coined it more succinctly. Like there's a potential for catastrophe, and that seems to be within the characters and around the characters at the same time through what's going on. And I wondered if you had meant I think both of the characters at some point were always worried about their like sexual safety, and that is not, I think, anything that you could absolutely find in the text. I don't think that there's anything that specifically points to something terrible like that happening, but yet we feel it, or at least this reader feels it. I feel like when Jon goes to find some skates in the basement or the attic of a neighbour, I'm so worried about where he's going with whom, and then Vibeke goes off with the man at the fair into town, in his car, in the toilet, in the bar. All the time I'm thinking, oh, will she be okay? Is this going to be all right? And there's one little story that the child that Jon meets up with while skating, and he goes back to her house. There's a little story, she tells him a family story about where her uncle jabbed a screwdriver in someone's eye for looking through and nobody bats an eyelid, excuse the pun. But nobody says anything. And I wondered if that was you saying, either covertly, something about the kind of threats to women, children, vulnerable people in general. If you were trying to say something about how there's always that worry for a mother with a child, or for a woman about herself, of how to keep safe in that way. Because I feel like that created a lot of the tension in the book. And I wondered if you had meant to do that.
Well, to be honest, that book is written really, it's written in present tense also for me. It's not a planned book. It's really, I didn't know what was going to happen. It was really scary to write it because every day there was something new happening and I didn't know how it would end writing it. So it was really scary also to me to write it. But I think the feeling in the book is exactly the feeling that I had extremely lot of anxiety at that point. I was almost on the border to be, like paranoid anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't know that having a child for me would kind of, escalate this anxiety. But having a baby, I was almost on the other end of normality, yes, or wherever that is. But because this kind of extremely fear that I don't know if you can connect to it, but to have this helpless, I wasn't prepared at all. I was just like 26 years old, and I had this baby, and it was like she kind of, even though she was outside my body, she was still part of my body. So if anyone did anything to her, it was just like it was her and me. We were so intensely close. So and this vulnerability. I mean, you go there with the child in the wagon, and it's like I was really scared only to leave the house, to go outside with my child. So I think this kind of the fear that I was living kind of every day is transmitted into the novel because that was that was it at that time. That was my present tense.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think however that what is in the book is a transformation of that. I don't think that, I feel like you have turned that into something else in there.
Yeah, that's good to hear. That's good to hear, because I think that's what art is. Art is.
I mean, if you do it, if you have the privilege and the luck to do it right, I think that's what art is. Sometimes I feel like some works are like a Rorschach blot. Some novels are like that, and that is not art. That's an image of what is actually happening. But that's another discussion anyway. But yes, I agree with you. I was reading around Norwegian literature in preparation for this, a little bit, a very small bit, about Sigrid Undset, is it? And how she created these worlds where women were central in the Middle Ages. And it got me to thinking about whether you believe this book and the kind of like issues that emerge from the book, even if you didn't plan them to. Would you say that this is a feminist book?
I always find it so hard with those labels.
Yeah.
I don't really, I mean, I don't really.
What is it that you find hard about it? I mean, I do too, and so it's unfair of me to make you answer this question, but
no, but it's like, I mean, what do you mean by feminism? I didn't write it, either pro or contra women. When I wrote it, I was really, I really wrote it for you. So but then, like now, it's like 24 years later I started writing it. I see that it's also so much also Vibeke's novel. So
yeah.
So, and I think that's the gift of the novel, is kind of, it's you are able to go back to it and kind of read it again, and
you can plug it into different eras and get something new, I think.
Yes, and that's really a great gift. But yes, but so I guess I'm curious, what do you mean? Well, you asked me that question.
I think because what I felt, what I took from it was that it presented motherhood in such a fresh light and such an honest way, and gave permission for people who are not, who don't lose interest in themselves to the extent that society maybe expects you to when you have a child. It gave them license to live a life, and I'm sure it must have done 24 years ago.
It's so interesting. Love has just come out this year, also here in Italy. Right now, I'm in Milan, in Italy, and but it's so interesting to have that book come out here, because here they have this. They really have this myth about motherhood. And being a mother in Italy, that's not a little thing. That is really la mamma, and they are. It's really amazing. And I was at the library in Ravenna 2 days ago, and they were, when the presenter said that this mother lets his son go out alone in this little village when he's 8, going to be 9 years old, and they were shocked. You don't let a child of that age go out alone. And I was just like, we are living in different worlds. So yes, so it's also, but that's kind of, once you have kind of settled that, I think that's more of like the cultural difference, but the core of the novel is easy to connect with however.
Yeah.
But I find your view very interesting, that what you're saying about the liberating, that Vibeke is kind of liberating, even though...
Yeah. And you leave so much room for the reader to interpret. Another, a hallmark of great art, I think, is that you do not force the reader into any kind of moral conclusion. You don't push that upon them. And that's why all the way through, all these flags coming up for the reader of, oh, what's going to happen? What are they safe? Will this happen? Will that happen? But if you look on the sentences, the paragraphs, none of it is there. It's in your own head, and in that respect, it works so well.
Oh, thank you. That's great.
I think that the reading around, like the Nobel Prize winners of literature in Norway, etc., it got me to thinking that many of the stories that are form that Nobel kind of canon are about outsiders or people who are marginalized, but also very often they're about like hunger, for instance, is the Hamsun book, the Nobel Prize winner, is about survival. And I wondered if you possibly saw this book as a book about survival.
That's a good question. In a way, yes, I really do. In a way, yes, because I mean, we won't spoil, we won't tell how it ends.
No, we won't.
But I think. What did you say?
All I'll say is the ending is amazing, and it does justice. It does justice to the build-up. It doesn't fail in any way. It's just it's very good as an ending. But yes, about survival.
Yeah, survival, because I think, because like what I said before, this kind of the deepest fear that what if there is nothing? What if it is really empty? What if we are, existentially, I mean, we are existentially alone, but then there is love. I mean, if there is love, but what if there isn't? So in that way, and
I think also that kind of fear and the existential angst is typified brilliantly in the car. Where Jon is in the car with the other person, and his little mind of 9 years old is flipping from fantasy to real questions of survival, I suppose, in one respect. And that age is where they are beginning to try to understand how terrible things can happen in the world. And at the same time are very happy to escape that world. And I just think you did that so beautifully in that situation.
Thank you.
I don't really. I'm trying not to say too much so that people don't get, have their time spoiled in reading it. But what time are we on? I'll just have a look, see if we've got time for. Okay, so would you like to read just a little bit more, and then we'll give some questions to the audience?
Good. Then maybe I should read. Maybe I can read from the passage where Vibeke meets Tom at the fanfare.
Yes, please.
She stamps her feet in time to the music and feels like dancing, taps a cigarette from the packet and lights up. I'm sorry. Good. He emerges from the shed by the spaceship ride. That didn't take long, she thinks to herself. He's carrying something under his arm as he comes towards her. He looks small, among the rides. Vibeke, she says to herself, pull yourself together. Not a fairground worker, surely. Having fun, he says, and stops in front of her before adding, well, I'm done for the night anyway. His voice is soft and he looks straight at her as he speaks. It feels as if the moment expands, taking on some newer, deeper dimension than she was prepared for. She looks at his boots in the trampled down snow, her gaze passing over his dark blue overalls, pausing at the yellow Ferris wheel patch at the tie, continuing upwards to his eyes. His eyes are intense. She thinks to herself, a strong gaze. Up for a coffee, he asks, and smiles again. She realizes how cold she is. Her feet actually are freezing. Thoughts pass through her mind. A traveling fairground worker? But it's only a coffee. She smiles and says yes. They pass some pinball machines on a raised platform as they walk toward the trailers on the outskirts of the fair. The trailers are made of a kind of corrugated metal, aluminium perhaps, or steel. She's not sure. She's never seen any like them before. She can't hear any traffic from the road. It's getting late. He walks in front and she notes how straight he holds his back. She likes it. It's a sign of self-esteem, a man who knows who he is. He stops and turns towards her, taking a packet of chewing gum from his right trouser pocket. He asks if she wants some. She shakes her head. He puts the cash box down in the snow while he takes off the wrapper. He glances at her and smiles before pressing the stick of gum down against his tongue. The gum is brittle and breaks. He laughs, and Vibeke laughs with him. He takes her hand and gives it a squeeze, and his eyes look at hers. Hi, he says softly, then bends down to pick up the cash box before they walk on. Vibeke looks up at the stars.
Yeah, you just reminded me of a part of where she and Tom are together, which is, it's one sentence, but it really has stayed with me. And it's, she just wanted to tell him how good looking he was. Really great. It reminds me of like a PJ Harvey lyric or something. It's brilliant. So does anyone have a question for Hanne? Yeah. Yeah, just ask away, and we'll if she can't hear, we'll.
I wondered if you like the translation.
Oh yeah.
If you have any connection with the translator, or?
Can you hear that? How was the translation? Did you have any? Sorry, what was it? Did you have any connection with the translator? And how was the process of translation?
No, with Martin Aitken, the English translator, I have had no contact with him during his work. So he's done all by himself, and he's won prizes for it. So, yeah. But I find it's terrible. It's terrible to be. It's wonderful to be translated, but it's terrible to read my own text. And it's because I know so well. I know this text is like, it's like my body, and now it's kind of has this other kind of skin, and it doesn't really fit any longer. It's really kind of, what do I do now? But also, it's this strange thing with English that, I speak with you now without really thinking too much about it. Yeah, but my English kind of, you know, a real English. I mean, I wouldn't know how this feels in an English body, because I don't, and that's the strange kind of, you know, the distance between the languages. I can feel Norwegian. It's like I feel language immediately. But with English, it's just like I can understand it, but the emotions are further. So it's really strange. I can't really judge.
Yes, yeah. Well, it feels pretty good for this English body anyway. That's all I could say.
So I'm grateful. That's good.
Anything else from anyone? Any questions? No? Okay, well,
Can I read it?
yes, of course, yeah.
Maybe because I don't read music, so if I were writing, I might longhand. I didn't understand what you said at the beginning about when Rachel asked the question about how you've got two voices, and you said something about putting the next version on the computer, and then you, Rachel, talked about that being the accident.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't understand that. Could you say a bit more about it?
It's just how the point of view of the two characters are placed on the page. And I think perhaps, Hanne, you were saying that when you were beginning to write it, sorry, your name is
Larissa.
What? Larissa is asking, how was it a happy accident that you started to put things together, the viewpoints together as you did? She didn't understand how that happened.
Well, because first it was like this, the text, like just a little text on each page,
Yes.
like this. And then it was just like after I'd written, you know, like about 30 pages of this kind of every Jon and Vibeke on each other page. It was just that I didn't, the feeling wasn't good. It was not something that I kind of intellectually thought, but the feeling of the text didn't work. It just didn't work like that. And then I discussed it with the man I lived with at that time, who was also a writer, and actually it was he who proposed, but why don't you try just to put them together? You can easily, you know, on the computer, you can easily, you know, tear them apart again. It's just a try. And I thought, well, why not? And so it was really, that was it. It was really this feeling of like this, it doesn't work, but I'm helpless. I don't know what to do with it. And then he proposed that, and I tried it. And then immediately I felt, well, now it works.
Yeah, that you get the like permission to go ahead.
Yes. And then it was just to go on.
Yes, yeah.
To go on, because it worked with that.
I did.
Yes.
One of the first things I wanted to ask, in fact, which I didn't ask, was whether you answered it actually quite quickly, so I didn't have to ask it. But I did wonder when I was reading it, I wonder if she wrote Jon and then wrote Vibeke and then just decided where bits went. No, I think it would have been a completely different book had you done that.
I think so. Yeah. No. It's really written as it is, and nothing is cut. I mean, it's really a book written on my two first novels are like this because there were no more words. It was that was all the words that came, and love. I mean, it's short because that was it, and yes, and I think the rhythm of the changing was really kind of physical, kind of, you know, going in and out.
Yes.
In a very, from one to the other. Yeah.
And the kind of the tone of the kind of scenarios where Jon pops up, sometimes it's kind of like, oof, you shouldn't really be here, you know, in this part because they're becoming intimate. Or I think that it's fantastic. Also, the way that your characters slip from reality into their dreams as we know, as writers of fiction, there's nothing more boring than other people's dreams. Yet you can render the mundane and the dream world without any kind of sentimentality or anything that makes it heavy or difficult to deal with. Do you do that on purpose? Do you avoid sentimentality on purpose, or?
Well, no, as you ask, I'm also thinking about the later novels that I've written. I think I allow more emotions in the later novels on the surface. I mean, in the written text.
Yes.
But I mean, sentimentality is never any good.
No. But even emotion, like you said, you distinguished it as emotion. Yeah, there's very little emotion in this book, is there?
Yes.
That's why it flies so beautifully. Do we have any more questions? I think we're probably getting up to our time. Can I just quickly ask what you're working on at the moment?
I just gave out a novel in Norway, and now I'm kind of, you know, totally emptied with that novel, which is my 14th novel. Ooh. So now I'm really kind of, I see the next one, so I'm just kind of waiting for it.
Yes.
So so that's where I am.
Well, thank you so much for that. It's been really fantastically interesting. And we look forward to many more of your novels being published in English, Stefan.
Thank you.
I don't know how to close you down, so someone's coming to do it.
We're not going to close you down, but we'll say bye anyway.
Bye.
Thank you, Hannah. Catch
bye
up.
also to the readers in Sheffield. Bye, people. Bye. Thank you for being there.